Ranking Member Raskin, and let me say thank you also to Representatives Frost and Moskowitz for convening alongside you this important roundtable discussion. And thank you to all of our panelists for being here and for how you've dedicated your time, your talent, your energy, your hearts to addressing the gun violence crisis in our communities. You know, it's a shame we're not having, like Ranking Member Raskin said, a full committee hearing on this topic, and that our GOP colleagues would rather hold their heads, you know, put their heads down in the sand when it comes to enacting policies that will save lives. And I'm sitting over here trembling, like I'm trembling. Because I was just sitting here as you all were speaking, just thinking about how, you know, we get to a certain point when our children, you know, hit, you know, once they're pretty much out of pull-ups, then we're ready to teach them how to ride a bike, and we're looking at bike safety, and, you know, we're so careful about making sure those training wheels are right. And, you know, we're, you know, running behind them and, you know, just like really careful about that. Like, how do they have the hat? I mean, do they have the helmet and the, you know, their arms, they have the pads on their arms and knees and everything, you know, take one you know, one off and not the other, and like, you know, it's just a whole thing. And then it's time to cross the street. We're teaching them how to cross the street, and we're so careful about crossing the street because we want to protect these kids. But then when it comes to guns, then it's like, it's free. Do what you will. Let social media teach you about guns. And I'm trembling because, you know, it matters who we allow in these seats, as you spoke to, Dr. Cochran, and what you said, also, Rep. Stansberry. So let me just start with how I am standing up here for my community, representing St. Louis. St. Louis and I are here today to say that every school shooting is a heartbreaking policy failure. That no student should ever have to go to school in fear, that no parent should ever have to watch their child walk into the school doors and worry if they're going to come back out. No educator should ever have to be forced to risk their lives to pursue their education or be forced to learn how to use a gun. To pursue their profession, I'm sorry. Yet this constant trauma and devastation is the enduring reality of schools all across our country. And I remember being a girl from the Midwest, I remember tornado drills as a child. I remember it was serious business, tornado drills, fire drills. Fire drills were, I didn't really too much care about. You know, you walk through the motions. I just never thought there'd be a fire. I understood as a child that this was just us learning what to do. But the tornado drill was different because it was physical. Because you had to get down on the floor, you had to put your hands over your head, and there was this whole thing, and it helped you to see that, like, something could happen to my body. Stay away from the windows, have to be in a particular place, at the door frame, and all of these things. But now we have the kids who are killing each other accidentally, and it's one after the other, and we just push it to the side. Social media videos over and over, and we just see the next one. We push it to the side. We're being desensitized to it. Missouri has the 5th highest gun death rate in the United States. And as a survivor of gun violence myself, representing Missouri's First, this issue, it hits so close to home. Threats of school shootings continue to be on the rise across this country, and including in my district. There have been 20 threats of gun violence reported against schools in just the last 2 weeks in my district. Our community is still reeling from a 2022 shooting at the Central Visual and Performing Arts High School in St. Louis, which is a predominantly black school. And just last week, a person with a loaded gun was arrested in the parking lot of another school in my district after posting on social media that he was going to go up there and cause harm. Had that day ended differently, it could have been another CVPA, another Appalachia, another Parkland, another Robb Elementary, and the list goes on. You know, we understand that students exposed to gun violence report increased anxiety and fear and depression and trauma, reduced academic performance, but go to school and learn. And then the behavioral issues. These issues often disproportionately harm Black and brown and marginalized students. So Dr. Cochran, I'd like to talk to you about the long-term impact of gun violence on our historically excluded students. How do the mental health and academic impacts of gun violence in our schools specifically affect Black and brown students who may already face additional stressors?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that question, and it's one that is very real, because even if for a second, right, you just look at the entire country, we know that there is a significant lack of access when it comes to mental health and behavioral services, when it comes to just even the long-term ability for us to treat some of the disabilities and the injuries that we are seeing. Now imagine, right, you talk about marginalized, vulnerable populations like brown and black communities, and you just have to increase that by tenfold and even greater in some circumstances. Our infrastructure is not equipped where we're able to provide the type of resources, right, and the type of care that's needed, not just to care for people that are injured and lucky enough to survive, but also people that are injured, and guess what? We don't want them to come back in with another injury, which we know in some communities like Baltimore, 40% will be back within 5 years. And so there is a significant gap that exists. And this is part of what, I think we've been talking about all afternoon, is how do we, number one, capture the right data when people are leaving the hospital? How do we ensure, right, that we're approaching this in a multifaceted way so that we can provide access to mental health therapists, right, to folks that are needing, other types of treatment, whether it's surgeries, prescriptions. I mean, the list just continues to go on. And when you specifically focus on brown and black communities, it's just absolutely devastating. And it's disproportionate, and that's very clear in what we've seen.
Thank you for that. And as a nurse myself, who has worked in the surgical units, ICU, it would always be a bad day when I would pull up in front of the hospital and blood is in the street. Toss the body out of the car and just left the body there, and people would drive off.
Well, and can I just add, that's why in your own district, people like LJ Punch, right, that are doing that work at the Brick, right?
Yes.
That type of work doesn't exist across the country. Imagine if you had, the Brick exponentially, put in cities across America where they were getting these wraparound services, and this often doesn't get highlighted. So I hear what you're saying, and that's why we're here today, right?
Exactly. Yes. Thank you for bringing up Dr. Punch, doing amazing work. We were able to get Dr. Punch funded through community projects. Yes. Thank you for that. And let me ask Mr. Brown, can you speak to the importance of taking a public health approach to the gun violence epidemic?
Well, if I speak to that, everybody in here will go to sleep because I won't know what the heaven I'm talking about. But I do want to emphasize, one, my gratitude and appreciation for you taking the positions that you've taken. We met at the 2022 March for Our Lives rally, and you telling your story about being a gun violence survivor yourself was awe-inspiring. And the reason why is, I come from communities like like this one here in D.C., which we're in a safe place right now, but safe for some. But for where I grew up, it wasn't that way, and where I teach, it isn't that way, and where I live, it isn't that way. So I'm saying thank you, because you don't have to keep waking up to do this work and fighting to do this work. It's like some people can come to work and go home, and that be their peace, or that be their sort of safety, so to say. And some others have to fight to get to work, and then fight to get home, and then fight at work, and then fight to get to work, and then fight to get home, and then fight at work, and so on. So I'm saying thank you to you, and I hope that when my students see this, they understand that there are people like you out there who are in these seats, people like you that are in these seats, and people like these panelists who love them and care about them, like Ranking Member Raskin, who love them and care about them and want to see new things for our students. I do know that taking a public health approach would make gun violence a more central piece of the conversation, and that does matter. I am underwhelmed, though, because I'm afraid of America's ability to effectively solve the problem, even when it does raise it as a public health concern. Where has America shown its ability to solve these types of problems ever? I don't know. Maybe there's data that says yes to that, but I don't know. So my challenge is for us to, I suppose, take from some of those sort of ingredients that exist within us in terms of our resilience and our grit, our ability to figure things out, and take that same approach to this gun violence issue.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that. We have to show up, and those of us that have the experience, we need to, if we can, we bring that to the table. And so thank you for your work in this. And I do remember that it was really, really tough, but I remember thinking, as many bodies as I've seen in the street, as many times as a gun has been pointed at me, and as a survivor, being able to still be here after suffering at the hands of a very abusive partner who almost took my life with a gun. We shouldn't have to dig through our trauma, as Representative Ayanna Presley says, to be able to help people. But for those of us that need to, we do that work. So thank you as well. I was going to close out with this. Last year, alongside my Democratic colleagues, even those who are in this room, we reintroduced the People's Response Act. This is a bill that establishes an inclusive, holistic, health-centered approach to public safety by creating a public health division within the United States Department of Health and Human Services, where it invests in violence interrupters and behavioral health personnel, trauma-informed care in both our schools and our communities. And so while our students and educators' communities, we know they shouldn't have to live like this. They shouldn't have to fear being murdered at their desks. But we know Republicans are walking around with assault rifle pens and still taking those donations, to fill their campaign coffers. Their fanatical obsession with guns is getting people killed. And so I just want to say, lastly, just to put on record, and we all know it, Democrats have introduced life-saving gun violence prevention solutions, just as Rep. Stansbury said. It's on the table. I've said it before and I'll say it again. How many more lives have to die? How many more people have to die before our GOP colleagues value our students' lives over their campaign contributions and over their time on television? Thank you, and I yield back.
Ms. Bush, thank you very much. Ms. Tlaib, thank you.